The Yemeni government urged the United States to pressure Houthis to lift the siege on Taiz and open main roads in the city. Special Envoy Hans Grunberg concludes two-day consultations with Yemeni parties in Amman. As the conflict in Ukraine continues, a shortage in wheat supplies can push Yemen into famine. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rana Swaylam. As the second month of the ceasefire is about to end, Grunberg requested the warring parties for an extension of the truce. While the Yemeni government has shown commitment in implementing and extending the ceasefire, Houthis say that they are still considering the UN request. This report has more details.
The Houthi militia is manipulating its agreement on the United Nations extension of the truce, and they have broken their covenant to the ceasefire throughout the previous month with many violations. The United Nations brokered truce is expected to expire in 2 weeks, and the Houthi rebels are still evading renewing it with the government, which indicates their intentions toward the Yemeni people. This came a day after the UN envoy Hans Grunberg said he was continuing to engage all Yemeni parties to overcome the outstanding challenges and to ensure the extension of the truce, in an attempt to pave the road for sustainable peace in the country. The UN Special Envoy said that the 2-month ceasefire has coincided with the start of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, which has made a considerable positive impact on the daily lives of many Yemenis, according to his statement. But he added that he was seeing unconfirmed reports of continuing armed clashes that were causing civilian casualties. Even within the truce period, the Houthi militia has committed many violations in several governorates in Yemen. A report indicated that in the last 5 days, the Houthi militia committed 341 violations, which caused the injury of 10 people. Those injured were in residential areas and civilian facilities in the city of Taiz when the Houthis' attacks took place. In total, at least 65 violations were reported in Taiz, 113 in Ma'rib, 69 in the front lines of Western Hajjah, 43 in Al Jawf, 43 in Al Hudaydah, and 4 in Al Dala governorate. The violations included offensive attacks using different weapons such as ballistic missiles, infiltration attempts, mobilization of weapons, and reinforcement of militants at various front lines. These violations took place with disregard to the UN truce. So what is the destiny of Yemeni people if the truce is not existing anymore?
With the reopening of Sana'a airport and accepting the Houthi-issued passports, the Yemeni government has demonstrated it has gone far in dealing positively with the UN-brokered truce. Yet the militia seems to manipulate this truce. This has made the government ask the US to pressure Houthis to break the blockade on Taiz. This report has more details.
Yemen's government requested the US on Wednesday to put pressure on the Houthi rebel group to end its 7-year blockade of the southern Taiz region. According to a Yemeni Council of Ministers statement, the request was made at a meeting in Washington, D.C. between the Yemeni Foreign Minister Ahmed Awad bin Mubarak and the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The two top diplomats also addressed strengthening bilateral connections between the nations, as well as recent events in the war-torn country and the 2-month truce, according to the official statement. According to a statement issued by U.S. Department of State, bin Mubarak stated at the discussion that Taiz is still under siege, and the Yemeni government anticipates further pressure from the international community, particularly the U.S. administration. Meanwhile, the Houthi-run Saba Station agency said that the group's Supreme Political Council was examining a UN request to prolong the ceasefire, and that it will make a decision based on its evaluation of the current ceasefire, which expires on June 2nd. On April 1st, UN envoy to Yemen Hans Grunberg declared a long overdue 2-month truce between Yemen's warring factions, halting all aggressive military air, ground, and marine operations. The parameters of the truce included the return of commercial flights from Sana'a and the reopening of highways in Taiz city, which had been shuttered for 7 years by the Houthis. Yemen has been immersed in violence and insecurity since 2014, when Iranian-backed Houthi rebels took control of most of the nation, including the capital, Sana'a. In early 2015, the coalition began the fight to restore Yemen's government to power. The 8-year battle has resulted in one of the world's greatest humanitarian catastrophes, with millions going hungry.
The Secretary General of the UN received a message from PLC President regarding government's commitment to the truce. The message was delivered by Minister of Foreign Affairs during his meeting with the UN Secretary General. PLC has further called on the United Nations to exert efforts to complete the implementation of all terms of the truce. The UN envoy concluded a two-day meeting with a diverse group of Yemeni public figures. They offered their perspectives on the truce and the prospects of its extension, as well as their economic, political, and security priorities for the peace process. The British Navy announced its investigation into cargo ship attack off the coast of Al Hudaydah. They have conducted a report after the attack to investigate deeper into the accident. Local sources stated piracy operations of the Houthi militia are active in Bab el-Mandab to threaten the navigation and target commercial ships. World Food Programme indicated that hunger has reached unprecedented levels in Yemen. The program is paying extra $71 million per month in operational costs to feed 3.8 million people per month. They added that higher costs with less resources will result in more ration cuts. As the conflict in Ukraine escalates, and with India announcing that it has stopped exporting wheat, this situation threatens to push many poor and zone conflict countries into famine. This report has more details.
Recent shocks to commodity markets, first generated by the conflict in Ukraine, have shaken the foundations of the world's supply chains. Prices have increased dramatically, and states have sought to shore up supplies to meet their own domestic needs, putting in place protectionist measures such as export bans. These dynamics only serve to threaten vulnerable countries facing growing levels of food insecurity. The effects of these shocks have been felt no more keenly than in Yemen, the world's worst humanitarian crisis, where more than half of the population was already suffering from food insecurity, even before the price spikes generated by the conflict in Ukraine and India's recent export ban on wheat. The prices of wheat, edible oils, fuel, and other commodities have skyrocketed this year, hitting highs not seen since the global financial crisis in 2008. But while these challenges are affecting populations all over the world, the countries most in need will be the first on the breadline and the worst affected by far. In Yemen, the population relies on the private sector for their food, 90% of which is imported. As global wheat prices spiral out of control due to shortages and export bans, the Yemeni rial continues to depreciate, leaving the private sector at the center of a perfect storm of shrinking purchasing power. Time is running out for Yemen. According to the United Nations, 161,000 people in Yemen will face extreme hunger levels by next month. But this figure might be optimistic. Food insecure countries need innovative and workable solutions that will enable international organizations to work with the private sector to secure sufficient supplies of wheat quickly and sustainably. And without a change in approach, there is an immediate risk that wheat supplies into Yemen will not meet the minimum levels needed to prevent hundreds of thousands more people being pushed into famine. Without a reliable and sufficient supply of wheat, underfunded humanitarian aid programs will not be able to cover the shortfall, and millions will be left to starve. As world leaders in New York turn their gaze to the issue of global food security, Yemen and similar states must be at the center of these discussions.
The Houthi militia prevented a number of citizens from traveling through Sana'a International Airport. Travelers confirmed that they were surprised by Houthi elements who took their passports and returned them from the departure hall without any reason. According to the passengers, they were scheduled to travel on Yemeni flight from Sana'a Airport to Queen Alia Airport in Jordan. Massam Project announced the destruction of 203 Houthi mines in Ain Shabwa. They confirmed that its teams were able to secure most of the residential areas in the district. They further called on people not to enter the desert areas that haven't been secured yet by Massam teams. The Houthi militia bombarded residential neighborhoods south of Ma'rib with heavy weapons. According to the sources, a number of shells fell on citizens' homes, causing material damage without any casualties. This comes 2 days after it targeted residential areas with drones and wounded 3 civilians. Military media of the joint forces said that a soldier was wounded by a Houthi sniper's bullet in the west coast. The military media reported that the soldier was wounded on his left shoulder by a Houthi sniper south of Al-Jarrahi in Hais. Coming next. As the conflict escalates, suffering of displaced people exacerbates nationwide.
اضطرينا نحن نغادر من ذي ونزحنا.
الله يستنقلكم يا محويتني لا الله يستنقل.
Welcome back. The 8-year war has caused the worst humanitarian situation in the world. Most of the Yemenis' concerns is the internally displaced people. Abdurraqib Al-Zuraiki is one of those displaced people whose life has been shattered due to the conflict. This report has more details.
Abdurraqib Al-Zuraiki, a 55-year-old displaced person from Al-Zuraika, lives with his wife and has 8 children. He suffers from diabetes for a long time and takes insulin injections under the skin, and is currently bedridden as he suffers from a deep wound in his right foot, but the wound did not heal because he has gangrene and needs a foot amputation. Abdurraqib has a house rent of 20,000 riyals that cannot be paid. The owner of the house is in Sana'a and the transfer fees are really expensive. His eldest son Yasin, who's 13 years old, left school and went looking for a job to help his family.
I live here and I pay rent for the owners of the house. No one is supporting us. Our situation is really hard and we are in severe need. The medicines are very expensive. A single cream costs 11,000 riyal. I can't afford the treatment. We left Zuraika as the rent was very expensive there and we don't have money for it. My health situation got a lot worse at the same time, so I came here looking for treatment. I'm really suffering a lot. I can't even provide for my family.
Even in Eid, they weren't able to get new clothing for their children like other families do. Abdurraqib was displaced from Al-Zuraika to Uzlat Al-Asabah. One of the reasons for the displacement is that the Zuraika area is deprived of health services. So he was displaced with his family members in order to receive treatment on a daily basis in a Rahma medical facility in Uzlat Al-Asabah.
He was moved from Al-Zuraika to Al-Khalifa Hospital, where he was hospitalized for 21 days. He was brought back home, still suffering from his leg injury. He could not receive proper medication as the hospital lacked specialized medical staff. Now he has been moved to Al-Sabiha, where he is treated at a local health facility. But as he can't work because of his leg injury, some of his neighbors started to help him feed his 9 family members. His wife is ill too. They have no source of income. I call on charitable people to help Abdurraqib's family.
He lives in complete darkness with his children. His wife suffers from a stroke that she got during a childbirth. She can't walk and needs physical therapy. This poor family needs support by providing treatment, accommodation tools, brushing blankets for children to protect them from the severe cold, or buying a food basket that will save them from hunger. He appeals to benefactors and humanitarian organizations to provide support and assistance for him and his family.
The Yemeni government demanded Yemen's exclusion from any embargo on grain exports. During the ministerial conference on the World Food Programme Security in New York, the Minister of Foreign Affairs stressed the need to ensure Yemen's sufficient import of wheat. He said that Yemen suffers from food insecurity, which is exacerbated by the effects of global food markets. Aden has witnessed an incredible rise in poultry prices. This has added extra burden on local citizens who cannot afford buying basic food commodities to feed their families. This report has more details.
Aden witnesses an alarming rise in the prices of vegetables and poultry, mirroring an earlier price hike in meat and fish. The growing inaccessibility to basic food staples had made it difficult for citizens to maintain healthy, well-rounded diets. The massive increase in prices prompted a wave of anger on social media, with citizens electing to boycott markets until prices are reduced. Media reports have attributed the crisis to the Houthi authorities imposing taxes on chicken entry into the region and the high cost of feeding chickens.
The rise of poultry prices traces back to the fact that farm owners are using expensive feed. We sellers did not cause this problem.
A single chicken used to be sold for 1,500 to 2,000 riyals, but now it's for 6 or 7,000 riyals. None of us can afford that. Farmers refuse to sell us chicken. They sell only to poultry merchants.
Chicken prices are approaching those of meat and seafood. The price of a kilogram of chicken has risen to 4,500 riyals, up from 2,500 riyals a few weeks ago. Vegetable costs have more than doubled since last year, with a kilo of potatoes, onions, and tomatoes, each costing up to 1,500 riyals.
Prices are incredibly high. Everything is expensive, from vegetables to foodstuffs. Tomatoes now sell for 1,500 riyals. Potatoes are the same, sometimes more. The government needs to take measures to stabilize commodity costs. The government isn't putting enough restrictions on poultry sellers, but the issue doesn't stop there. Transportation is expensive, and so is everything else in this country. Where is the security and the stability?
As most citizens are facing salary delays, a protein-rich diet is hard to secure for the majority of Yemenis. With the price hike, households may have to replace the regular chicken with imported chicken, despite the latter being unpopular among Yemenis, owing to quality degradation after being stored in poor conditions for long periods of time.
Navigational sources revealed that Hodeida port had received 12 ships carrying 340,000 tons of oil derivatives since the start of the truce. This has varied between gasoline, diesel fuel, and household gas. Yemeni oil company in Sana'a announced the release of the coalition ship loaded with 20,000 tons of gasoline. Despite ships carrying fuel having docked at Hodeida port, prices of oil derivatives in Houthi-controlled areas are skyrocketing. Long queues of citizens are seen standing at gas stations, yet Houthi officials are accused of running their black market where prices double incredibly. This report has more details.
Dozens of vehicles lined up again in long queues in front of fuel stations at the capital Sana'a. Sources warned that the Houthi militia loyal to Iran will create a new round of fuel crisis. Eyewitnesses in Sana'a said dozens of vehicles stopped in front of fuel stations to obtain oil derivatives. This comes at a time when the official spokesman for the oil company, which is under the control of the Houthi militia, announced that the supply situation is the same. The Houthi militia has fabricated a stifling fuel crisis over the past period, with the aim of officially raising its prices and making profit by selling fuel on the black market at double prices. According to sources, the militia confiscates large quantities of fuel arriving through the port of Hodeida and unload them into its military supply without paying their prices. Under the truce in Yemen between the government and the Houthi rebels announced last month by the United Nations Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, the opening of Hodeida port is stipulated. This should allow for the entry of humanitarian aid and oil derivatives through Hodeida port. residents of the Yemeni capital and the rest of the areas under their control are suffering from a stifling crisis in fuel, which is usually available on the black market at very high prices.
Here's a reminder of the main headlines. The Yemeni government urged the United States to pressure Houthis to lift the siege on Taiz and open main roads in the city. Special Envoy Hans Grunberg concludes today consultations with Yemeni parties in Amman. As the conflict in Ukraine continues, the shortage in wheat supplies can push Yemen into famine. This is the end of the news. For more, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Yemen Today English. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.